West Hickory. Now I saved the best and indeed the biggest for last. In 1870, a skeleton was uncovered 12 feet beneath a mound in West Hickory, Pennsylvania. But there was a bit more to it than that. At first, excavators found an enormous giant iron helmet. Can you imagine what it's like pulling a giant's helmet out of the dirt? And then they found a sword. It was a shocking 9 feet in length, a very impressive find. And then came the skeleton itself. Now it did have to be glued together, but there were reports it was an epic 18 feet in height. Now if that's not a giant, I just don't know what is. The bones were very well preserved, so if this is true, we're talking a major rethink of ancient civilization. According to newspapers of the time, this mighty skeleton was taken to the nearby borough of Oneced and put on public display. For whatever reason, it never made it into the history books. Perhaps someone realized it was a trick, or someone kept the skull for themselves. Still, just take a second and imagine 18-foot people running around with giant swords. Now that would be a cool movie. Number 2, Lompoc Rancho. Now up to this point, when we've talked about giants, it's been people who are a bit taller than your average human. A historic find of a skeleton that's 8 feet or so could just be explained by saying someone was really tall, or they just ate their spinach back in those days. The Lompoc Rancho case from 1833, though, is a bit different. This could legitimately be a giant, because the skeleton there was found to be 12 feet tall. Oh yeah, now that's what we call a big fella. It was unearthed by soldiers who were busy with their spades digging a pit, probably not the outcome they expected. The deceased was sporting a large set of teeth, which is a rarity with this kind of excavation. It's hard to hear about these kinds of finds and not wonder whether the legend of giants could still be true. Number 3, Beaver Lake. A diver exploring Beaver Lake in Arkansas in 2014 believed he'd seen evidence of a civilization of giants. That's got to be pretty exciting stuff, eh? All he needed to do was provide the details and everything would be cool. Unfortunately, what he apparently saw wasn't backed up by visual records. A video was taken during the dive, but frustratingly, it doesn't show anything. Okay, so we can take this one with a huge pinch of salt because there's really no evidence. But what did the diver claim to have found? He said he saw a man-made wall in a cave that, combined with a spring, strongly suggested the presence of giants. Well, that's nice, but what about skeletons or maybe something like that? A femur bone? Maybe a tooth? Anything? Big footprints? Apparently, there was nothing like that, just a wall and a source of flowing water. Oh well. There are many legends of giants from Arkansas, and while many people have claimed to have seen them, we are still looking for proof. Number 4, Catalina Island. Well, there have been lots of movies made about giants. Turns out evidence of actual giants exists near the home of movie making, Los Angeles, California. Catalina Island is found just over 20 miles from the Californian coast and has been settled since 7000 BC. And it isn't a small island either. It's 22 miles long and 8 miles wide. That's plenty of space for a giant to roam around, right? And Catalina Island had its very own Indiana Jones in the shape of Ralph Glidden, who'd been interested in the local archaeology since he was a teenager. At one point, he surprised the community by saying he'd found the remains of skeletons between 7 and 9 feet tall, who supposedly lived on the island 3,000 years ago. Not only that, but he'd built a picture of what they looked like too, claiming they were blue-eyed and had fair skin. He mentioned a gruesome scenario where he uncovered a funeral urn with the remains of a girl inside and 64 child skeletons around it. This is the first time we're hearing about non-male skeletons, and it seems the girl in the urn was some kind of ancient VIP. Was Ralph Glidden telling the truth, or was he spinning a lie to keep himself in the public eye? And some do point to the lack of proof, which is odd considering Glidden collected bones and artifacts, selling them to museums. Although, having said that, if this was a deception, then surely it would be a big gambit. He'd be risking his reputation on something that was very difficult to prove. But maybe one day we'll find out the truth. Number 5, San Diego Giant. Up till now, we've been talking about giant skeletons, but this one is more of a complete specimen. He still even had his own skin. It's definitely yucky, but it is fascinating. A cave in San Diego was the location where the remains were found in 1908, and the people who discovered the giant were prospectors who were probably on the hunt for gold or other metals. Very Wild West. Like other giants, the body was measured to be 8 feet long. Reportedly, it was even found with clothing on and a leather hood. And the giant wound up as part of a sideshow before being spotted by the Smithsonian Museum. An arrangement was made for the giant to be purchased for the princely sum of $500. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, yeah, it was. The Smithsonian weren't just going to hand over the cash without a proper look-see and made sure they got a skin sample. When they analyzed it, they found that it wasn't skin at all, but gelatin. Yeah, that's right. The whole thing was a fake. So it's always good to do your own research and see things for yourself. You can't always believe everything you hear. Now, number 6, Miamisburg Giant. Now, who knew that Ohio was just popping with giants? I certainly didn't. The city of Miamisburg in Ohio seems like a fairly modern place, but it has a secret history of giant skeletons, one that relates to its very own mound. This prominent local landmark hasn't been excavated in any detail, but there have been finds in the area that suggest if experts really wanted to start exploring the Miamisburg mound, they'd find pretty compelling evidence of an ancient society. Human remains measuring just over 8 feet were found in the Miami Valley, and more dramatically, there's an account of a large skeleton popping out from under a tree when it was blown over during a storm. This happened in a field near the mound. And it's too bad no one took a picture. Apparently, like with many skeletons on this list, this skeleton no longer exists. Some initial work was done on the Miamisburg Mound in 1869 when a couple of burial vaults were discovered. However, since then, the mound has been pretty much untouched, and authorities don't seem too excited to look into it either. This contributes further to the idea of an establishment cover-up. And the truth might be out there, or in this case, maybe in there. Number 7, Steelville, Missouri. In 1933, teenager Bill Harmon was exploring a cave, reportedly looking for arrowheads. The place was known as Puckett's Cave and was near Billy's family home in Steelville, Missouri. And little did he suspect that in this unlikely location, he was about to stumble on a buried giant. Because Billy didn't find arrowheads, but human bones, which he pulled up from under the ground. Returning with help to dig up the rest, he excavated the layers of ash and limestone before coming face to face with the skull of an 8-foot skeleton. Notable features on it included an unusually small head, and whoever it belonged to had been sent to their grave in a sitting position. It was taken to the office of local Dr. R.C. Parker. He didn't really have anywhere to put it, so the skeleton wound up in the hallway. Let's hope no one with a heart condition dropped by for a checkup during that time, right? And just in case you're thinking this couldn't sound any weirder, what about what happened when the Smithsonian Museum came to collect the giant? Well, the skeleton mysteriously disappeared. And where did it go? Well, shocking allegations were made that the Smithsonian had long covered up evidence of sophisticated early civilizations, such as that of so-called giants. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Number 8, Iowa Mound. Discoveries of giants aren't necessarily associated with modern structures. But in 1857, a work crew came across a staggering find while excavating the basement of a governor's building in Des Moines County. Now, it does sound like a scene from an Indiana Jones movie, but they unearthed a vault which housed skeletons around 8 feet in length. This vault sounds pretty formidable, with local newspaper reports of the time claiming it to have an arched burial chamber 6 feet in height and with reinforced walls that were 14 inches thick. These giants really knew how to protect their dead. While it's strange to find human remains that are so big, some experts believe using the term giant isn't appropriate, thinking that these people are actually just very tall humans. And whether they're giants or not, this was one crazy thing to stumble across doing a routine work gig. 9. Cresap Mound. In 1958 in Marshall County, West Virginia, a curator for the Carnegie Museum of Natural History named Don W. Dragu, wow, that's a name, was examining the Cresap Mound. The mound was made by the Adena culture, who are Native Americans thought to have lived in various states of America from 1000 to 200 BC. though opinion on that does vary. The name Adena was taken not from their culture, but from the home of a governor, and not very much else is known about them. In the mound, Dragu found the skeleton of a man who was just over 7 feet, and he bore the hallmarks of a so-called giant, such as a developed cranium and a large jawbone. This gave experts a further glimpse into the lives of these ancient people, particularly with regards to anthropology or human development. This height was extremely surprising, and scientists are still searching for more clues about these ancient people to see if they really were giants. Number 10. Serpent Mound. In 1894, an Ohio farmer was going about his business hunting some foxes. Little did he suspect he was going to stumble on something of major archaeological interest. This was no ordinary slice of history, because he had found graves which appeared to contain ancient giants. And that's not something you see every day, right? Located in Hillsboro, Ohio, the graves are composed of limestone slabs. They were 3 feet long and a foot wide. They were close to Serpent Mound, a famous Native American mound made of earth and shaped like a serpent. Some fascinating artifacts were discovered in the mound in the 19th century. When experts looked inside the Ohio graves, they reported that they saw large skeletons over 6 feet in length that seemed to be the remains of giants from a biblical order known as the Nephilim. The Nephilim appear in Genesis 6 of the Hebrew Bible and are the result of a union between divine sons of God and mortal women. And they lived pretty violent lives by the looks of things, because the ribs of one of them had spear and arrowheads stuck inside. But were these really the remains of the biblical giants? Many believe the entire thing was a hoax, and there are very few pictures to back them up, and the actual whereabouts of the skeletons is now unknown, and so the mystery of the Ohio giants still remains.